Guys, on the bench today, we've got the brand new FCX10 by FMS, and today we're going to answer the question, is this better than a TRX4 for less money, or is it just a cheap clone? Let's find out. Just like the TRX4, the FCX10 has a beautiful licensed scale body with quite a lot of scale detail. That body has a quick release mechanism. There are tabs underneath the fenders that you push in to release the body. I will say though that this body is not quite as easy to release as the one on the TRX4. These tabs can be pretty stiff and you often have to work your way back and forth in order to get the body released. The tabs on the TRX4 are under the fender wells and they're really intuitive for releasing the body. It's just 2 in the back, 2 in the front, and the body comes right off. It also snaps right back on again. The FCX10 body just takes a little bit more fiddling to get removed. It's not terrible, but it's not quite as effortless as it is on the TRX4. However, once you get the body off, you see a huge advantage of the FCX10, and that's going to be these magnets here. These magnets are the electrical connections for the lights, and the lights are included on the FCX10 as opposed to being a $100 upgrade on the TRX4. We're going to be taking a look at these lights in just a little bit. The body itself does feel very strong. This is some nice thick plastic, and I think it's going to hold up to off-road bashing very well. That being said, the TRX4 body does have a full cage inside of it, and so it will be a little bit more reinforced, but you can see that you've got a cable here you have to unplug when you take the body off, and the wiring's a little bit more complicated on that lighting. Under the hood, we can see there are quite a few differences and quite a few similarities between the two, but you'd expect to see similarities between 1/10 scale crawlers, as a lot of them are built very similarly. We can see that the motors are in the front. We've got a bunch of servos hiding down here in the middle, just like we do on the TRX4, though there are more servos on the FCX10. We'll get into that in just a minute. We've got a centrally mounted battery tray on both vehicles. The FCX10 has a combined ESC and receiver, whereas the Traxxas has a separate receiver and ESC. Both of these are claiming water resistance, though the Traxxas claims to be waterproof, while the FCX10 claims to be just water resistant, with the servos being waterproof, but the ESC being IPX4 water resistant. Now, if you're used to hearing things like IP67 and IP68 on your phone, IPX4 might not sound very good, but let me explain a little bit about how those systems work. The first digit is dust resistance, and the second digit is water resistance. The higher the number, the better. That being said, IPX4 means that it can handle sprays of water from any angle, and if that doesn't sound very impressive, take a look at this water spray test for IPX4 certification. You can see that's a lot of water, and that means that this ESC should be able to handle pretty much anything you can throw at it short of actually dunking it in a lake. Also, don't worry about the X in the IPX4. That's dust resistance, and that just means this hasn't been tested for dust resistance. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna explode if it gets dirty. This has no moving parts, and there's no reason why it would have a problem getting dirty. They just didn't test for it. The FCX10 has a 4-link rear suspension, just like the TRX4. However, the TRX4 has a 3-link front suspension with a panhard bar to accommodate its chassis-mounted servo, whereas the FCX10 has a 4-link front suspension to accommodate its axle-mounted servo. This truck also has portal axles, locking front and rear differentials, a steel ladder frame chassis, and unlike the TRX4, this comes with a steel bash plate in the middle, which is a really nice upgrade. The transmission is one place where the FCX10 has a huge advantage over the TRX4. The TRX4 has a 2-speed transmission, as does the FCX10, but this also has dig and front-wheel drive. And don't worry, we're gonna dig into this transmission as well as these differentials in just a few minutes to see what makes them tick. Controlling all those functions is going to be this 11-channel transmitter. It is FMS branded, but based on the button layout, it appears to be made by the same company that makes some FlySky transmitters. This thing's 11 channels. It has got buttons and switches all over it and appears to be more fully featured than the TQI remote that comes with the TRX4. However, the TQI remote does have Bluetooth for some additional programming. In order to understand all the programming of this remote, you're definitely going to want to check out the manual. This manual's got a lot of great information in it, and it's something you're really going to want to check out before you run this particular truck because there's a lot going on here. Speaking of a lot going on, we also got a bunch of accessories with this truck, which I'll be showing you in just a minute. Moving on to the tires, I would say these tires are kind of a hybrid trail crawler tire. They're not super soft and sticky, but they're not really firm either. These should do well for general trail bashing and some light crawling. I'm curious to see how these tires are going to handle this thing at full speed on 3S, which we're going to be testing here soon as well. Now, rounding out the electronics, we do have a waterproof steering servo with a metal servo horn, and that is attached to the axle. These wheels are not bead locks. However, they are on standard 12mm hexes. These are metal hexes, which is really nice to see. So if you wanted to run bead locks, that would be an easy swap. These are nice and light though. While I'm taking these off, take a look at what else you get with this truck. You get a back cap for the bed. You also get fender liners, as well as some lights and a few other accessories. This axle is going to come apart in a similar manner to most other crawler axles, where you just take the 4 links off and it should be good to go. While I'm taking this apart, if you're having a good time, make sure you get subscribed. We do these kinds of deep dive teardowns all the time, and you're not going to want to miss the abuse I put this thing through as well. On this particular axle, the bolt holding on the front links is kind of hard to access, so I'll just take it off at the chassis. And of course, they're using all hex machine screws in this truck, which you would expect at a price point like this. You can see we have a cable-operated locker, just like on the TRX4. However, the method of operation looks a little bit different. I do appreciate the FMS cable management here. However, it does make taking this servo out a little bit more difficult. We'll see if that ends up going back on or not. And with that, our axle is free. Taking a peek down in there behind the aluminum servo horn, I can see this is a steel-geared servo. There's no servo saver on here, so I'll be interested to see how this servo holds up to some abuse. These portals unscrew from the outside, which actually makes them easier to work on than portals that have screws in the back. And as you can see here, we've got sintered steel gears and ball bearings. These gears look pretty beefy, but we won't know for sure how strong they are till we test them out. One thing I will mention is that these screws don't feel like the highest quality in the world. That's kind of a subjective feeling thing, but I would recommend using really good tools with them and making sure they're clean so you don't strip them out. Working on this axle reminds me of one big advantage that the TRX4 will have over this truck, and that's upgradability. The TRX4 has been out a long time, and you can get basically any upgrade part you want for it. Being a new platform from FMS and inherently having fewer upgrades, your options are going to be more limited. Putting power to these axles are plastic drive shafts with steel CVDs on the ends. We've also got steel CVD axle shafts in the front, and I'm sure steel drive shafts in the rear. Working with this, I can tell you that the plastics and metal do feel very high quality. Removing this cover, we can see the gears in here, and this has a fairly similar design to the TRX4, where you have internal differential gears, and then you have a lever connected to a collar that locks the differential itself to this output shaft, which essentially locks the differential. One big difference here we can see is we have spiral beveled machined ring and pinion gears, whereas the ring gear on the TRX4 is just sintered steel. We've also got all big ball bearings throughout this axle. This should be a pretty tough setup. Now, before we put this axle back in the truck, let's take a look at this fancy transmission. All right, we get a closer look at this skid plate. While it's fairly thin steel, it should be plenty strong enough for a truck like this. As with most crawler transmissions, removing one of these is not a casual undertaking, so if you're enjoying yourself, let me know and drop me a like. In order to remove this battery tray, we're gonna have to take all these connectors out, and a great way to keep track of where they go is to take a razor blade and just carefully scribe a line along all of them. That will give you an alignment mark for them. Just be careful that you don't end up nicking any wires. With that pulled up, hopefully we can sneak these servos out with the power module and not have to worry about disconnecting them. These shift and dig servos are just held in with a clamp, which arguably makes them easier to take out than on the TRX4. However, they are connected with these really fine wires, which can get easily bent and makes me a little bit nervous for removal. And with that, hopefully we can sneak this power module out the bottom of the truck. There we go. These shift servos are unmarked. Hopefully they're a little bit stronger than the Traxxas ones, because the Traxxas ones tend to break pretty easily. And we can see we have a sintered steel pinion with a plastic spur and a slipper clutch. I did notice there's not any thread lock on this drive shaft pin. That makes me a little bit nervous. And we finally have the transmission isolated. That took a lot to get out. However, keep in mind, this is my first time doing this, and I'm not necessarily doing it the most efficient way possible. All right, let's see how much I'm gonna regret taking this apart. So what we have in here are a bunch of sintered steel gears. We've also got some sliders and some ball bearings. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's just a bunch of gears, but to quickly explain how this works, this is a 2-speed transmission. So you've got one slider that will choose between 2 different gear ratios. And then this is also a dig and front wheel drive transmission, which has sliders here that allow you to choose between locking the rear wheels, having 4-wheel drive, or having front wheel drive and just having the rear wheels spin free. One interesting thing I noticed is that there appears to be a pin missing here on this part. This is part of the 4-wheel drive dig function, and I looked in the manual. Apparently you can set this between 4-wheel drive, front wheel drive, and rear wheel drive, or 4-wheel drive, front wheel drive, and dig, and I'm assuming adding or removing that pin is what sets that. I'll be curious to see which one it is out of the factory, but we'll find out here shortly. All right, guys, I'm gonna put this mess back together, then I want to talk about some more of the advanced functions of the ESC. When looking in the manual, I noticed that you can actually adjust some of the settings on this ESC directly from the transmitter. That includes the forward and reverse modes, whether it runs on LiPo or nickel metal hydride, and a few other things. Another nice thing is this has a throttle output, which means you should be able to use a separate ESC with this and just use this as a receiver, though I'm not entirely sure how you would set up the power delivery. That's something we'll have to look at in the future. All right, guys, enough talk. Let's see how this thing performs. Before we bash this thing, let's do a few comparison tests between the two. First one, let's see how high we can go up on this ramp. This is going to be low speed, both diffs locked. And we can almost make it to the top. Now let's try the FCX10. Again, low speed, diffs locked. Starting to slip. Looks like it can just about make it to the same point though. Yep, almost to the top. Keep in mind that the Traxxas is going to have better traction because it's got Proline Hyrax tires on it, and this has the stock RTR tires. Now let's have a slow speed race, see which one's slower and more controllable. They both feel pretty good, but the Traxxas is definitely slightly more controllable at low speed. Let's see how fast they can go. TRX4 top speed run, we're not gonna need a lot of room for this. All right, let's check it out. 11 miles an hour, that is not very fast, but pretty good for a crawler. Let's try the FCX10. Okay, it feels pretty similar. I can tell you it does feel more stable though. Yeah, it definitely feels more stable. One more pass. I think that's a good top speed. Let's check it out. All right, 12 miles an hour, so just a little bit faster than the TRX4. Okay guys, enough of this testing. Let's go have some fun. So there we go, guys, the brand new FMS FCX10. This thing's a really cool truck. I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit, and for trail bashing, I think I like it better than the TRX4. It seems to be more stable, and it's overall just a more fun truck to drive. Now, I did not rock crawl this. If you're doing serious rock crawling, you're probably not gonna buy either one of these trucks anyway. So for $100 cheaper, you get a truck that has included lights, included dig, all the other same features, a clipless body that isn't quite as easy to remove, and a really fun truck. Now, there are some downsides to this. The primary one's going to be parts availability. You're not going to have as many upgrade choices for this truck, and parts are going to be inherently harder to get. Traxxas has a huge supply chain with local hobby shops, and at least here in the United States, is just a larger brand. All that being said, I think this is a really cool truck. I've enjoyed messing with it. I think you would enjoy messing with it too, and I think you would enjoy one of these videos.